When I started my work on saving seeds in 1987, and I was writing at that time, and I used to define India as a biodiversity economy. And the West industrialized was the fossil economy. But of course, the fossil infection has spread all over in the name of development. Most of the Indians still live in a biodiverse economy. So when we conserve biodiversity and we change the paradigm, we show that what matters is nutrition per acre, not yield of empty commodities per acre. We show that we can feed the world while conserving biodiversity. That other species and humans are not in competition with each other, but they cooperate with each other. And if you go to the mountains of Bavaria, as I was last night, the small dairy farmers are totally aware that milk is a product of the plants which are eaten by the cow, and therefore your good milk is biodiversity. So no matter where in the world you are, this link between species in the web of life through food as what weaves the web of life as a nutrition cycle, that's a foundational, ecological, universal principle. And the colonialism divided us, fossil age divided us, but these are two huge errors of humanity. And we don't have to treat these errors as the defining of the future of either humans or the earth. We have been made to believe that industrial agriculture with monocultures, chemically intensive production, fossil fuel intensive production, produces more food. And the trick begins with the measure of yield. You see, it has more yield. But if all I'm growing is a monoculture of corn, of course I'll have lots of corn. Not such a big achievement. But if I'm having corn and beans, I'll have beans and corn. And the soil will have nitrogen. And if I have diverse kinds of corn and diverse kinds of beans, then I have resilience in my field. This biodiversity system is what I have practiced, promoted and defended. And in India we call it Navdanya, which means 9 seeds. It's called milpa in Mexico. So when you measure the biodiversity as a true output, you find that the more biodiverse the land is, the more food it produces. Not just for humans, but for all species. So the way to address hunger is actually to produce more nutrition per acre by intensifying biodiversity, not by intensifying industrial agriculture. Intensifying industrial agriculture has a very heavy footprint. And that's why the appetite for biofuels, the appetite for animal feed is so limitless that they're having to go burn the Amazon. No small farmer has had to burn another country's forests. If we take the full ecological footprint into account, industrial agriculture is a hugely inefficient system. Uses large acreages to produce something that's not even eaten by humans. Only 10% of the corn and soya is eaten by humans. The rest goes for biofuel and animal feed. So how do we shift? We shift by recognizing food as the currency of life, therefore respecting the ecological systems that produce food, protecting the bees and the butterflies, protecting the biodiversity of the plants, and making agriculture primarily the conservation of the biodiversity of the planet. We get food, but we now get high quality diversified food. And the problem of the monoculture of the mind is looking at one product that's empty of nutrition, full of toxics. That's not food. When we get biodiverse food, it has enough for all. But biodiversity goes hand in hand with decentralization. Globalization, rules written by the Cargills and the Monsantos and the Nestles and the Pepsis, have given us this commodity trade and hunger. Decentralization and circular economies and true free trade, free for nature, free for the bee, free for the cow, free for the child, and free for the farmer, and free for us in terms of food freedom. We eat the right thing, we eat good food for all. Our work in India has shown that we can feed 2 times India's population by conserving biodiversity. If we can do it in India, this can be done all over the world. We then bring trade to fair trade of that which you can't grow. So it's all right for you to get our spices. You can't grow pepper here. That's fine. That's how we traded. That's what we used to export from India. That's why the East India Company was created, to try and colonize us, because we had the spices. The Alps have beautiful medicinal plants. The Himalaya have beautiful medicinal plants. We need to start diversifying our idea of what comes from the land. And agriculture must return to its original roots. Agri-culture, the care and culture of the land. Once we do that, we'll have enough food for all beings, including good food for all human beings. No child will starve. No person will be deprived of good food. Well, it's nearly 5 decades since my activism to protect the earth, and beginning with the amazing movement of women who came out and said, we're going to hug the trees, you'll have to kill us before you kill the tree. It was a civil disobedience through the act of hugging trees. And it was called Chipko, which means to hug. I worked with communities that fought mining, where they literally hugged the forests and the mountains and the rocks. I have worked with communities that have hugged the rivers and said you cannot build a dam. My own work on Navdanya and seed saving, which I started in 1987, began with a commitment of civil disobedience against patent laws. And I call it the seed satyagraha. And I learned this from Gandhi. Gandhi engaged in 2 amazing civil disobedience. His first was in South Africa. He went to South Africa as a lawyer. And then the British were starting to pass laws. The British fought with the Boers and then took over, and then they started to pass laws to discriminate against the Indians and basically require Indians to have a compulsory registration paper which had to be carried all the time. They could get into your house and ask an 8-year-old child to show. This discrimination on race was unacceptable to Gandhi. And so he and the Indians started a non-cooperation civil disobedience, which then over years, much later when the apartheid was created, became the basis of fighting racism and anti-apartheid. Apartheid means to separate. Gandhi's first satyagraha, which is civil disobedience and means satya, truth, agre, force, the force of truth. The force of the truth of our one humanity is violated when we discriminate on race. So we must disobey every law. The civil rights movement of North America was inspired by Gandhi, Martin Luther King, even South Africa's anti-apartheid struggle. When he came back to India, he first joined the movement against the forced cultivation of indigo. Indigo was a very, very valuable natural dye. The British wanted control of it, but was forcing the peasants to grow indigo while the peasants starved. The protests were there. Gandhi came back, joined it, and in 1917 he did the satyagraha, the civil disobedience against planting indigo. And in 1930, the British wanted to monopolize our salt, because monopolies create super incomes, especially when they're on essential things like salt, which we must eat every day. And Gandhi walked to the beach and picked up the salt and said, we need it for our survival. We will continue to make salt because nature gives it for free. Your laws we will not obey. And that brought down the salt laws. So when Monsanto and others wanted to patent seed through genetic engineering, I took inspiration from Gandhi's salt satyagraha and I said, I'll fight to not allow such laws to be put in place. And we don't have them in India. Our law says plants and animals and seeds are not patentable. But I said, even if our governments are corrupted, which is totally possible, we will not obey, because we have to obey the higher law of life, of biodiversity, of the seed. Seed must renew. Seed must be exchanged. And so we started the seed satyagraha. And we continue it. Every 10 years, the corporations make an attempt to make it illegal for farmers to save seeds. We revive our seed satyagraha. Just done it again. There's a new law on the seed they're trying to pass. We've just spread the word among the communities, and we refuse to obey. The beauty of satyagraha is you can never lose. Because satyagraha is about your truth. And as long as you don't give that up, they can't take your truth away from you. Biodiversity is democracy. Our national poet, Tagore, wrote a beautiful essay called Tapovan. And he said, India is special because our civilization did not build giant buildings. Our learned people went to the forest to learn democracy. And in the forest, the tiniest of herbs and the biggest of trees are equal. They're different, but equal in standing, equal in the right to exist. The animal and the plants have equal right to existence. And it's from the forest we learn democracy. It's from biodiversity we learned democracy. But when you learn democracy through diversity, you create the conditions of peace. So Tagore also wrote our national anthem, and I've written a blog recently because of the way hate is dividing and creating this domination of an assumed superior religion, a superior race, a superior person. That idea of superiority was the basis of colonialism. It was justified on the civilizing mission of the Christian Europeans. It was basically a plunder of resources, but justified in the civilizing mission. We have a resurgence of this syndrome of superiority. And the syndrome of superiority rules through divide and rule. It spreads hate. Tagore's first para of our national anthem is how beautifully diverse the land is. And, the different mountains, the different rivers, the different climates. We have all the plants of the world. We have the Arctic in the Himalaya, and we have the Sahara in our desert, and we have the rainforest in the Western Ghats. But he goes on to say, and religions came from all over the world and wove gardens of hope. We have made religion a reason for conflict. So my blog is Growing Gardens of Diversity, Weaving Garlands of Love. Biodiversity is where we will find democracy, where we will find peace. And that's why we must cultivate it both in nature and in culture.